Welcome to Over My Head Podcast Point 1. We're not calling it 1 yet. We're still figuring it out. But I'm Aaron Ruby. This is Will Ruby.
Hey.
You say a little something more so the camera cuts to you and then you say something.
Oh, you can. Well, I'll talk, but you can click on my face. You're like video directing this. You can actively click it around if you wanted to.
So I can. All right, cool.
There you go.
Well, there you go. All right, so Over My Head is a podcast about Will and I taking on projects that we don't necessarily have the expertise for.
Like podcasting.
Like podcasting. And my big project that I take on that I don't have expertise for is making a time-lapse dolly. I've been working on a time-lapse dolly for how long, Will? Like a
year and a half. Yeah. The first time we tried it was in San Bernardino.
I thought Hannah Flats. Yeah, near San Bernardino.
Yeah, outside San Bernardino. So yeah, that would be a year and a half ago. That was the summer of 2012.
Yeah. So basically, time-lapse dollies are expensive. The really good ones, like motion control kind of rigs, are well over $1,000. So I wanted to make something much more cheaply myself. And basically, the idea of a time-lapse dolly is that the dolly that the camera is mounted on, it moves, and then it takes a picture, and then it moves. So by stopping between each photo, it can take really long exposures for like star time-lapse without blurring the image as it goes.
Yeah, so I think to say you want the time-lapse dolly to produce time-lapses that the camera moves throughout. So it's a linear rig. The
Right.
camera mounts, takes picture, takes picture, and you string that together into a video or...
Right. So each picture becomes a frame in a video file that like really compresses the time it takes. So it might take 2 hours to go through a whole move with 30-second exposure for each shot, and that becomes like a 10-second video of the
Right.
stars flying by, and they're really cool. I love doing them.
So, and the state of the art for this is that company, what is the one out of like the Midwest?
Not Emotive Mo. You're talking about
They make kind of a similar light, what is it?
Here, I'll look it up. You keep talking about what
anyway,
it might be.
Yeah. Well, the idea of these is that you want a very uniform movement. You want the camera to come to rest completely. You want the camera to take its picture, and then upon finishing, the dolly moves as soon as it can, and repeat that cycle.
Right. Yeah. So to do that, to actually make a dolly that can do that, basically I'm hooking an Arduino, which is a little tiny microprocessor with a bunch of like pinouts, hooking that into the camera and then connecting that to a stepper motor that drives the dolly itself down the track. So the Arduino is doing all the thinking for this motor.
And it's also
and for
triggering the camera.
Right.
Yeah. And then you're using, explain the kind of drive you're using.
Meaning like the stepper motor?
Yeah, so you're using a stepper motor, but it's not on the dolly itself.
Right. So right in its current form, the stepper motor is mounted at the end of the track. There's a string that goes from the stepper motor to the dolly and kind of like draws it towards the motor at the end of the track between each shot. Use a stepper motor just because you can kind of precisely control the amount of movement that you're getting. Like each step is a certain amount of spin. So like by calculating like how many steps you actually go, you can get precise movements and repeatable movements if you have a rig with enough like mechanical precision to like allow that kind of thing. I don't think I'm quite there yet with my rig.
So what related to that drive, so what are some of the problems we've had with just that part of the repeatability of motion? I feel like we've had a lot of trouble in that specific avenue.
Yeah, well, the first thing The first time we went out to Hannah Flats, we were using a giant dolly, which was extremely heavy. It was made out of like a steel cheese plate, like a block of steel with holes drilled in it, with
And on
giant
proper dolly track,
and
like
on
speed
speed
rail.
rail track.
Yeah.
Yeah, that entire rig was really really heavy. So the first major problem we ran into is that the motors, these tiny motors that we were using, couldn't really keep up with that amount of weight, like being able to pull that. We had to like so precisely level
Level
the
that.
track in order to make that work.
And there
Um,
was also, wasn't there some overroll problems too? Because once it was moving, it didn't want to stop.
right, it had inertia because it was so heavy.
Right.
So you'd kind of set it with like a slight downslope, like so that there'd be a little bit of tension from the weight of the dolly
Yeah.
as it would slowly pull uphill, but just barely uphill.
Right. And did we back roll it in that version? Did we try that? Where we would release rope? Have we ever tried that?
We've never tried that, although it's a
Hmm.
really good idea.
The
Yeah,
motor doesn't have the clamping strength,
it
or
could probably like the torque of the stepper motor is pretty high when it's holding and just holding. It's not trying to move between steps.
right?
It'd probably work pretty well to like incline the track like this and start the dolly on the high end and then slowly release
Walk
it
it down.
down the track.
Yeah.
That then you don't have to drag it up, which is heavy. You could just let
Right.
it go a little bit at a time.
Yeah. As long as you could do that reliably.
Right,
Because
which
the other one of the other problems we've had, of course, is well, a couple of things related to the rope. So we have the stepper motor with its um, kind of drawstring area where it coils the rope onto itself, and then that goes down to the dolly. The rope itself has some elasticity. It stretches a tiny, tiny bit, right?
mhm.
And then also, as it coils, we get different step sizes because the coil itself is increasing in size. So the amount the rope is moving.
Right. Right, and the spool is actually two screws with tin can lids from maybe like a can of beans or a can of Campbell's soup or something that I poked holes in to create the spool. So like
Right.
because of that, it the string that I'm using, the paracord, can like wind and kind of stack upon itself. And
Oh,
then
that was the
every
other
every
thing.
so often you'll get like one of the loops will fall off the stack, and then you'll get this jerk
Back.
backwards as
Yeah.
it settles itself.
Right.
Obviously, this is stuff we need to work out in the plan. We might have lost Will, but maybe he'll come back. Going live.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
Gone live.
All right. Cool. So this is Aaron Ruby and Will Ruby. We're brothers.
We're back now.
Back from a little break. We had some technical difficulties. Will's computer had an explosion.
Yeah, I was trying to use my iPad. I had these grand ideas of doing this on an iPad, so I didn't get distracted because now I'm on a computer and there's all these widgets and
There's so
things
many.
everywhere demanding my attention.
Apparently,
I'm gonna try.
Will's computer screen is just spinning wheels and like
There
flame
actually is
effects.
there's Xcode is behind this window with the graphs for like how the iPad is doing and all that stuff. So
How the iPad is doing?
yeah, we'll go into it some other time. Anyway, we were talking about the rope drive, I believe, on the dolly, and the particular failures thereof.
Yeah, do we need to go back through what we already covered, or like what other parts of the rope drive? Oh, I know what I did kind of cover when you left, and I may have to
Sure.
cut that out of my continue. I continued on for a few minutes when you were gone, Will.
Right.
It wasn't the same without you. The viewer feedback was
Very negative.
negative. Yeah, they love you as a co-host.
I am really popular with the
They
viewers.
want you to be here. So
Yeah,
as soon as
absolutely.
you left, viewership
Yeah,
crashed.
it just tanked. We were watching the analytics in real time. It was, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I did say is that a possible different configuration, we talked about the rope drive at the end of the track. So the track,
Right.
the dolly is down here, the rope drive pulls it towards itself.
Mm-hmm.
The other configuration that we should try eventually involves mechanical aptitude that maybe I don't have.
Right.
But you could
Part
mount.
of the premise of the podcast.
We should have like Merlin Mann's bell that he dings whenever something is on the nose or
Yeah.
spot on.
Okay.
We could mount the stepper motor onto the dolly itself,
Right.
and
And do some
run.
sort of feed through.
Right. So I actually own a belt that has teeth on it
Right.
that would run from one end of the track to the other, and then it would kind of have pulleys to keep tension of the
Oh, I
gears and
see.
the belt against the spinning motor,
Right.
and that would drive it down the track. And I think that is a really good solution.
Right. And that's, I think, what the other, like the big boys who actually know what they're doing, I think, came to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I've
The
seen
other
those.
thing I was thinking is like you could maybe do some sort of like worm screw and feed the rope
Really
through it.
cutting out, and I'm not sure
Cutting
if it's
out.
like a practical joke even.
It could be my signal.
It was funny because it was like all of a sudden you were just, but like
Am I back?
the hand signaling was like really funny.
Am I back?
Oh yeah, you're back. I can hear you
Okay.
fine.
So I was thinking like a worm drive of some kind, or maybe even you could use a shorter length belt in an enclosure with the rope being pulled by that. So you still have a rope that you're pulling against, but you have some sort of something being driven by the stepper motor that feeds against the rope instead of having you have to pull it through.
I think credit where credit's due on that. That was Phil Swanson.
Phil Swanson came up with that idea.
That was an early idea from Phil, and I think it is a good one. And it's very similar to just using a belt with teeth on it.
Right. The advantage of it is that you could use it on a longer run track. You wouldn't need a belt the length of your track.
Right. The belt that I own is like 8 feet long.
Right. And I think that was another thing I thought we should mention is after that first outing where we used the speed rail, you came up with a pretty clever roll your own dolly that we can kind of do on the cheap with just tubing, right?
Yeah, so because of the weight issues of speed rail, even transporting that is kind of a hassle. It's
Right.
heavy, thick gauge. It's like
It's
and the
bulletproof.
it's bulletproof. Yeah, you could do anything with it, but because like kind of the big idea is to hike to really secluded, very dark places to do these time lapses.
Right.
You want lightweight so you can carry it with you to the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So,
Or even fly with the equipment that you need
True.
somewhere.
True. So the current version of the track is made out of electrical conduit. It's like maybe 1-inch thick tubing. And I found a little tiny dolly on eBay that's extremely lightweight too. That fits, kind of straddles that conduit perfectly. And that solved the problem of like the motor not being strong enough to pull up the track, but
Right.
there's still plenty of other issues to.
Yeah. And just to summarize those issues so that we can talk about them in a future episode in detail, I think. But there's electrical gremlins, there's programming flaws. You and I have done the programming on this Arduino. The first version I remember notably was using timer functionality on the Arduino just completely incorrectly, so the steps were just wildly inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of that level of.
It was also using the Excel stepper library that we never really got a good handle on.
Right, and also it's sort of more than we needed. Like we just want to go full speed, then we want to stop. We don't really need any of the speed modulation stuff they do for you. Good library though. Don't want to knock it.
They also allow you to control multiple steppers at the same time if you're doing like a 3D printer of some kind.
Right.
Yeah, it is a great library. I just didn't understand it, and it might be too much for our use case.
Yeah. So I think the current version just alternates the state of a port up and down in such a way as the motor understands.
Right. Yeah, we basically have to tell a pin on the Easy Driver. Here, I've got one sitting next to me. I can show you.
Easy Driver is a pre-built board that a dude provides that controls stepper motors.
Right. So on this board, you can see a really tiny Arduino knockoff. It runs on Arduino code. You can compile using Arduino stuff. It's just $8 instead of 20. And then it's a little smaller. Although Arduino does have an official version that's very good. And then this is a Easy Driver. You send this pulses like ticks, when to step.
High-low logic, yeah.
Right, when to step, and then it will send the correct. It'll flip the coils in the stepper motor appropriately so that it spins
for the desired effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
What the Excel stepper library would do is control that input high-low in such a way to make the motor go different speeds.
Right.
Which in reality we don't do now.
Right. I've always had a problem with writing code that looped effectively, though. So
right.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think we had like variable overflow problems. I think now we've gotten to a point where the code itself is moderately functional, and we are limited in troubleshooting by electrical problems again.
Yeah,
we're alternating between those two extremes.
Electrical problems and a desire to continue adding functionality that we're not sure how to implement.
Right.
Like, this is the old stepper motor, like, control unit. It has its own Arduino and relay to fire the camera and a stepper motor board, just like that red board I just showed you. But I also added this potentiometer knob, which would allow us to switch from night mode to day mode without having to re-flash the internal memory in the Arduino. The idea is, go ahead.
Day mode is pretty much move, stop quickly. Night mode is move, stop, move, giving enough time to do those long exposures in nighttime.
Right, and day mode can even be full motion. Like, it doesn't have to be stopping. So,
right.
like, because your shutter speed is short enough at that point that you're not going to get a motion blur,
right,
you could just have it crawling continuously down the track, firing off shots as it goes.
Right.
And you get a pretty cool motion time lapse.
Right.
But the idea is that if the knob is all the way to the left, you would get a night mode where it would like do 30-second exposures. It would move very slowly, and it'd probably take
8 hours.
Or yeah, I was thinking like 2 hours to get down the track, so you could get a few shots in a night. And then once it got over, got to like about here, it would switch into like a slow day mode where it would just barely crawl down the track, and then you could even do like full motion for like video moves.
Right.
All the way up here. It would just keep getting faster until you reach the top of the pot.
Right.
Yeah, slowly we're adding that kind of functionality to it, but it continues to be tricky. I plugged this in the other day in preparation for a trip that Will and I are going to go on with our older brother Greg in about a month and a half, just to make sure everything was working fine. And of course, nothing.
It was not working fine.
It doesn't work at all. So. Yeah. That's usually how our trips go. Is
right.
We spend
a lot of time.
I bring a non-functional Timelapse Dolly on the trip, and then Will helps me fix it.
There's so the outstanding issues that I'm aware of outside of adding the potentiometer. We were having difficulty. The Easy Driver is attached to a battery of considerable size. Stop me if I'm wrong, Aaron.
Yeah, it's not huge, but it's like a scooter battery.
Yeah, it's like a quarter of a car battery. It's a good size.
Right. Yeah. It's still a 12-volt battery, but it has a high amp hour. It's 10 amp hour, so you can kind of run a small application like ours for nearly a week or something without having to worry about juice.
So that's all cool. The Easy Driver is attached to this battery. There have been problems with that in the past where we fried Arduinos by hooking things up backwards, but we've learned from those mistakes. Uh, and then the Easy Driver has a supply that goes to the Arduino to make the Arduino go. And it seems like, though we're not really sure, that the Easy Driver supply under load drops too low to keep the Arduino alive, so then the motor goes slack.
Yeah.
And that can cause rollback or just a stop and a stutter or other undesired behavior.
Right. So then when you piece that dolly move together, you might see that the dolly falls backwards to halfway through the track at some point.
And then recovers, but you've already flubbed your shot.
Right. Yeah, it's weird because I don't know if that is a logic issue in our code or if it's something to do with an overflow maybe in our timing.
I don't think so, because the way we fixed it the last time we were out was by putting the Arduino on a battery brick, like a standard 5-volt USB charge your phone battery brick. And that seemed to fix the issue. So separating the two supplies from each other. And that may have introduced other gremlins I'm not immediately recalling. But at the time, it got us through. It got us through the weekend.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something we're gonna have to figure out. It's tricky. We live 6 hours apart. I'm in Los Angeles, Will's in San Francisco, so the only time we have to like really focus on
getting this
working is when we're like trying to use it out in the middle of the wilderness.
Right. Charging with solar panels and, that sort of thing. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's probably good for now, Will.
Yeah, I think that's a good overview, and then we can go into more specific stuff as there is.
Yeah, and we're gonna do more projects than just the Timelapse Dolly. That's kind of my pet project.
Right.
Will, you had a different thing that you wanted to talk about a little bit as something that you're kind of diving into?
Yeah, so I'm prone to doing little electrical whatsits and stuff too. But my current ill-advised project, I've been doing home photo developing. This is a photochemical tank with Caffeinol, which is a homebrew instant coffee plus vitamin C film developer. And I've ruined probably... It
sounds delicious.
Yeah, and it smells even better. But I've ruined probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 rolls of film at this point. The last 2 or 3 rolls, though, I've gotten recognizable images that have held on film. The first one was way, way overcooked, very heavy grain, recognizable, but required a bright light shining behind the film to be able to see anything. And the other one was very faint, but good detail. So I think I'm getting close, but we can talk about how I've ruined so much film, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So until we figure out how to sign off to this thing, I guess we just end it. Thanks for watching.
I liked when you said, I'm Aaron Ruby, he's Will Ruby, we're brothers. I thought that was a pretty funny, like when we came back. I don't know. There's something there.
That could be an ending, you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, we're brothers.
You don't like it.
I'll think about it.
All right.
All right. Talk to you later, Will.
See ya.